Hey folks, welcome to the Unsung podcast, or not, as it may be. This week, we have no episode. Chris's laptop is completely fried. He doesn't have one anymore, basically, so he's currently in the process of trying to source a new one. If you want to know how he lost it, well, he was a victim of a ransomware attack. A few weeks ago, we did a whole explanation as to what happened there. Pretty horrible circumstances, to be honest. But we are in the process of trying to get a new device for him so that we can continue to do the podcast that you know and love. If you would like to help him towards his goal of getting a new laptop, just go to unsungpod.net/donate, where you can find our PayPal and chuck us a few quid if that is your jam. But I didn't want to leave you hanging this week, so I've actually got an episode from a completely different show that I want to share with you this week. You see, about a month ago, Chris was on a really great podcast called Shit You May Not Have Seen, which is basically, they do what we do, but for films. He was on that talking about the Bobcat Goldthwait film, God Bless America. So yeah, if you like Unsung and you like the format, you'll really love this show. Enjoy.
Hello, welcome to the Shit You May Not Have Seen podcast, where we talk about films you may not have seen. I'm Scott.
I'm Joe.
Hi, I'm Chris. Is that what I was meant to do?
That is.
Christopher.
The planets have aligned and the Antichrist has descended upon us in the form of Christopher Cusack.
Anti-Chris.
Anti-Chris.
The bringer of light is here, mate.
So we've been trying to set this one up for, was it 5 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks?
5 weeks easily,
we drew it out our virtual hat a wee while ago.
We did.
And it's God Bless America from 2011.
The most hilarious ringtone ever. Just text PIG.
We have a press that just gives them a free pass.
The boys were caught after setting the homeless man on fire.
Coming up on Tough Girls.
A tumor this size is very dangerous. Do you have any family? Oh, gotta take this.
My name is Chloe. I live in Virginia Beach, and everyone loves me because I'm so pretty.
I wanted an Escalade! This is the biggest day of my life, and I'm doing all the work!
Hey, creepy. Isn't the schoolgirl thing a little played out?
Don't move and don't make a sound.
If you want the car, just take it. My parents got me the wrong one anyways.
Yeah, that's a tragedy.
Did you just kill Chloe? Awesome. That was a fantastic start. Do you take requests? Who are you killing next? The Kardashians? People who use rock star as an adjective? People who give high fives? Anyone who wears crystals?
You're friggin' Rambo, man.
What are you looking at, old man? I'm recording this. Thanks for not talking during the feature. Thanks for turning off your cell phone.
You're welcome.
Why have a civilization if we're no longer interested in being civilized?
Hey, buddy, what's wrong?
A lot of crazy people out there. I only want to kill people who deserve to die.
Frank.
What?
This is more fun than killing yourself, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess. I know it's not normal to want to kill, but I am no longer normal.
Really gotta take both those spots?
Yeah.
This is the best day ever!
Wheeling out the Bobcat Goldthwait guy.
Yeah.
On the podcast twice. 100% Bobcat
should just
Goldthwait.
have you just do
Bobcat's
every
biggest
single
fan.
one of his films, man.
Yeah, I think I'm being typecast. I think that's what it is.
We'll put them all in there, and every time we come up, we'll get you in.
Of course, man.
You can give
Makes
us the lowdown on how good they are or how bad.
Well, this is true.
So I was on here talking about World's Greatest Dad prior, and I got all my kind of like preamble about Bobcat himself out of the road. So I feel I can spend less time on that.
Less time on Bobcat, more
time on just on the film.
On the film, that's good. So this film came out in 2011, written and directed by Goldthwait again.
Can I ask, see when you guys are putting your lists together, because I didn't suggest this. I mean, I said that I liked this.
You brought it up.
I brought it up. Who suggested this? Who put this on your lists?
You.
Did.
So you guys pursued this
because we spoke about it on the last one. We put it on the list.
So you were intrigued.
Oh, aye, absolutely. Because that World's Greatest Dad was fucking brilliant. I loved it.
Yeah.
Good. So did any of my other ones got on that list?
Yeah, I don't think I've mentioned any other ones.
No, there was a document. There was one of the documentaries.
The documentary, yeah. We've never done a doc. Maybe we should
maybe do one.
Yeah.
That was that really fucking grim one you were talking about.
Yeah, that's not going to be a cheery week. I mean, that's actually a double documentary, and I don't know what one's the most miserable. I mean, it's maybe the best documentary I've ever seen, but it's not a fun time. So you're probably right to go with this one.
We're kind of in a bit of misery here. So.
Shooting wings.
We're definitely into misery here,
comic
mate.
relief.
Fuck's sake. What was that other one we did? The ultra miserable one, in a glass cage.
Yeah,
you seen that? You seen that?
You know what? I've not seen it, but I've sort of seen it by proxy because my pal Vicky has told me so much about how traumatic it is.
It's wild. It's proper wild, isn't it?
She's trying to get me to watch Salo. And,
1,000 Days of Sodom.
Yeah.
That's meant to be fucking grim as well, man. Aye, totally. I'm up for that.
That's got to make you some special sandwiches.
Special sandwiches?
That'll make more sense once you've seen it.
Nah, okay. I can imagine what's on these special sandwiches, man. I'm not
actually,
into
I'm willing to bet you probably can.
Is it that bad?
Aye, so God Bless America. It's a social commentary film, I guess. Kind of. Yeah.
It's a satire. It's a pitch black comedy satire. Yeah. As you said, 2011, 105 minutes, which, going back to this film, I think it's, again, a bit like World's Greatest Dad, maybe about 10 minutes too long.
Aye.
Just because of the type of film it is.
Yeah, I'd agree. In
saying that, again, like World's Greatest Dad, I'm not entirely sure where I'd make those cuts, but yeah, it just seems just a little bit overlong. So I've written the pitch black satirical killer road movie, right? Because it is a kind of road movie. It's
totally. Absolutely, yeah. It's like a twee indie version of Natural Born Killers.
Yeah, so that'll come up. There's a few different comparisons. Stars Joel Murray and Tara Lynn Barr. He's a middle-aged man who thinks he has terminal cancer, and she's a sociopathic teenage girl. They both go on a killing spree together to purge awful people after bonding over their disgust about modern US popular culture. Apparently, Bobcat Goldthwait wrote the script as for his wife's Christmas.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah,
it's a fucking strange relationship. That must be it.
It is. He's described it as, quote, a violent movie about kindness. Let's be honest, right? This film is sort of, again, a proxy for Bobcat Goldthwait's feelings.
Totally. Like, I mean,
and he's clearly his wife's feelings as well.
It doesn't. It's not subtle about what it's trying to say.
Mm-hmm. No. I saw a couple of interviews. He did an interview at South by Southwest one year where he said that he'd been particularly disturbed at the trend around who's the next Charlie Sheen, who's the next person that's publicly fallen apart, and that's all we're going to discuss. I think he described them as non-versations. Clearly he's just a guy that's dismayed at the level of popular discourse and where people gravitate in popular culture. He did make comment that he'd considered, well, not that he'd considered, but this film was in place of, let's say, a documentary that would have tried to address the same issue but just wouldn't have had anything like the appeal or the insight. There's something about comedy, something about satire in particular. I'm sure we can think of multiple examples where you are able to say a lot of the same things, but you're able to do it in a way that somehow gets past people's boredom reflex and their resistance. You can get in there because of the enjoyment, and then maybe the ideas simmer away and people start to reflect on them a little bit. So this film enabled him to do that. But it's very much him speaking at points.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
Having a good mump, It was released as video on demand a month prior to theatres.
Prior to it?
Aye, in 2011, so... in terms of the theatre performance, I'm not really
sure. Its box office was tiny. It was something like 123,000 it did.
Yeah, but this was like an early experiment in that,
Aye, the kind of dual release type thing.
Yeah, does this work? and I'm sure they've refined that approach in the interim. As I said, key cast, that guy Joel Murray is the brother of Bill Murray.
I didn't realise.
The main guy?
The main guy, brother of Bill Murray.
Holy shit.
He's been in Mad Men, he's been in that US version of Shameless. Also, by the way, he's the brother of Brian Doyle Murray. That's the senior brother, the elder brother of the family.
Or it was in Caddyshack and all that type of shit.
Caddyshack, he's in Scrooged, he's in 16 Candles. He plays Jack Ruby in JFK.
Right, so he does,
like Oliver Stone.
Groundhog Day as well, he's in that.
Is he?
Aye.
That would make sense, aye. Yep. Tara Lynn Barr, she's got a really limited film catalogue. She was also in a horror film called The Darkness with Kevin Bacon and a bunch of TV work. She was actually nominated for Best Performance, Leading Actress at the Young Artist Awards for this film.
Right.
Bobcat Goldthwait spoken about this character in this film because having a murderous sociopathic teenager is a little bit taboo.
In America as well, aye.
And it detracts from his voice as this kind of disgruntled, middle-aged sort of liberal old man that's disillusioned with society. But as he says, there's certain things in this film that he kind of wanted to do, and he needed the young female character to be there. I mean, for example, spoiler alert, you're going to shoot a 16-year-old girl from My Super Sweet 16.
Yeah.
You need the foil of otherwise it's just a murderous middle-aged old man going about doing awful things. And we'll talk about it a bit. Maybe it kind of is that anyway. But the Tara's character in this, Chloe, that was a necessary device he felt to try and give the film a little bit of balance and credibility. Yeah. You might also recognise Chloe's dad in this, a guy called Larry Miller. Famous comedy face. He was in Pretty Woman, he was in Best in Show, he was in Suburban Commando, that classic. He was in Third Rock from the Sun and 10 Things I Hate About You. He's a really familiar looking guy. Also, the actress Melinda Page Hamilton, we spoke about her in the context of World's Greatest Dad. She plays Frank's ex in this. I think her name's Alison, and she was also in the Bobcat Goldthwait film Sleeping Dogs.
That's the other one you recommended, aye.
Yeah.
Yep.
Please don't get me back on to talk about that. I love that film. It's very good. It's one of those films, and actually, I was talking about how this would be a really fun concept for a sub-series. Is just the best films you only want to see once. You know what I mean? That's a fucking great movie. Never show it to me again, please.
Yeah, we were talking about that the other day.
There's a few. There's a few, definitely.
Yeah, and some of them are on this list, which means I'll need to watch them again.
So far, I think a large part of this list is that's a great movie. I really don't want to watch it again,
but I'm going to have to.
Unfortunately,
and knowing how we usually work, I'll need to watch it 3 or 4 times before we actually get into recording.
Exactly.
I kind of felt that way about Kill List. So you guys talking about it, I was like, will I rewatch it? No, I don't.
I don't think it's good rewatchability.
Enjoying those feelings, no.
No.
The soundtrack for this, there's a BRMC tune in this that's quite prominent. Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, who were kind of like, I mean, this is maybe just past their peak, but they were still, relatively recognisable. The soundtrack also features a whole bunch of Alice Cooper, and the film actually mentions him quite a bit. I think it mentions Alice Cooper as being the first person to break gender dress norms in music. Which
is nonsense.
Which is actually not true, because like Bowie was before that.
Bowie was before that, but in the film they also mentioned that like Bowie came after them. Because he's like, I forget Bowie, like he didn't do it first.
I think the chronology is wrong.
Arthur Brown was he's like the guy.
No, he was the guy that invented the makeup approach.
The theatrical stuff.
There was definitely people before Alice Cooper.
Oh, aye, absolutely, aye.
I mean, you mentioned Natural Born Killers. There's loads of inspirations from cinema that you can find. The plot actually about a terminally ill man shooting rude people is maybe inspired by a short story called To All the Rude People. This is by a writer called Jack Ritchie in 1961, but I think more importantly it was published in an anthology by Alfred Hitchcock called Not for the Nervous. And then the film's also considered by some people, and I've not seen Bobcat Goldthwait explicitly say this, but I mean it seems awfully close to be a coincidence. A 1998 British comedy called Parting Shots. In that film, the character Harry Sterndale, played by Chris Rea, by the way.
Chris Rea. Always going home for Christmas.
He learns he's dying of cancer and decides to go vigilante by shooting dead all those who have made his life a misery, and then later discovers, didn't have cancer at all.
Yeah, I read the synopsis for that and I was like, that's very close for Bobcat Goldthwait.
Yeah.
And
could they not just played his music to them instead? They'd have killed himself, man.
Yeah, that surely is a form of cancer.
Brain cancer, definitely.
Chris Rea gives you cancer. Heard it here first, folks.
The character of Tara, she's inspired by a Liza Minnelli character, I believe, from a film called Sterile Cuckoo. Bobcat Goldthwait said this in an interview, and apparently Liza Minnelli was really young at the time, but she plays this totally mental teenager in a film going way back early in her career, and he said he just absolutely loved that character and wanted an opportunity to try and recreate someone like that. And I think Tara,
thinking on the character, does seem she seems like a theatre kid just in her performance.
It's almost kind of cartoony.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, she also seemed older. I don't know how old she was when she was in this role. I mean, she seemed older than a teenager.
I'm not sure, but I know that she did say that she had to run it by her parents to do it.
Right.
Her parents were really big fans of the film. They loved the script. They loved the messaging in it. They obviously knew it was a bit close to the bone, but they were really on board with it. But I mean, she can't have been. You know, it wasn't like
she wasn't
Luke Perry.
She wasn't in her 40s.
30-year-old playing a 17-year-old.
No.
Some genre nods. Obviously, a really, really apparent one is Falling Down, the Joel Schumacher film.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like a prime candidate for this film, this podcast, man. I mean,
classic as well, man.
Bonnie and Clyde would be one. I mean, that's the road movie part, and they embrace that quite a bit in this. Wild at Heart.
Aye, definitely.
David Lynch film with Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern. And it's got some of that madcap energy as well at points. When Frank is buying the AK-47, the dealer describes it as, quote, the very best there is, when you absolutely positively got to kill every motherfucker in the room except no substitutes, which is obviously Samuel L. Jackson's quote from Jackie Brown, the start of it, and also during the teddy bear scene in this, the target practice scene, I think it is, there's a subtle nod to True Romance. Is it in the background music? I can't remember. There was something there that nodded to True Romance, and also Roxy wears Elvis glasses, again similar to True Romance.
There's there was Pulp Fiction points in it as well. They reminded me of Honey Bunny and Pumpkin.
Aye, totally.
Even at one point, Frank is dressed like Tim Roth in Pulp Fiction. He's got the white t-shirt and the Hawaiian shirt. And his hair's kind of combed over the side.
Point, actually.
I just thought he looks like him. Looks like that character.
That's right.
And there's the diner scene as well, where the two of them are sitting opposite each other in the diner. And they're dressed kind of similar to those characters. Could have been coincidence, but I don't know. You never know. Considering all the other references in the film,
here's one that you might not have picked up on. During the news of the theatre shooting, so they do a theatre shooting basically, and during the news of that, along the bottom of the screen you can read about Libyan terrorists and their foiled attempt at obtaining plutonium bars, which is a nod to Back to the Future. There's, I mean, I'm sure you'd want to go beat for beat in this. That's maybe.
We don't need it, man. Not necessarily. We can talk around it. Just talk through the film.
And maybe it's worth somewhat going beat for beat and then coming back to the next bit, because
we do need to start at the very beginning though, because that opening needs spoken about.
Yeah, so that's one of the absolute. That was basically the reason I watched this in the first place. I was reading a list of like indie cinema's most shocking moments, and it just had like a whole bunch of like pull out sections, you know, and this was like this opening gambit from this film, like, wow, what the fuck. And how would you describe it?
He basically kills a baby with a
shotgun.
I mean, doesn't he just fucking kill it?
It obliterates it, turns it into soup.
Yeah, so there's basically he's in bed and
we've all been there in that situation. You're lying and you can hear your neighbours next door just being noisy, ignorant fuckers, and
you do just want to
do think about it. I wish I had a shotgun to deal with this.
Exactly, except in this one he goes in and he takes it out in the baby, or rather the woman cowardly, like she holds the baby up as a shield, and he's just like, well, fuck it then, and he shoots it.
That's exactly what it is, a shield.
Explodes all over her.
Yeah, like the gore is off the hook at this point.
Yeah, but the get out is clearly that he's fantasizing. It's like a kind of, he's smiling to himself as this is just a sort of waking dream that he's having. But this is all part, like the reason it's so punishing is because he's actually meant to have a brain tumour at this point, or he thinks he does. Or, well, no, he doesn't.
At this point he doesn't. He's
severe
having
headaches, and then he's like, right, I'm going to have to go to the doctor. But before he does that, it gives you a little bit of context in his life. It cuts to like his routine in the morning. So things like there's like in the background you see like Tucker Carlson-esque TV shows You see TV shows like Dumb Butts, I think it is, which is basically Jackass. Tough Girls, things like that. There's an American Superstars thing, which plays a big part in this, where you've got, you know, the panel from like one of these talent shows, like X Factor, where you've got an English arrogant guy, clearly meant to be Simon Cowell, Latina, which would be Paula Abdul, the black judge, and that I'd never watched American Murder. Who that
I don't know.
Meant to be.
Lamar or something like that.
No, was it one of the Jacksons? Was it Tito Jackson?
Tito, maybe.
Something to do with the Jacksons, I think.
Anyway, so yeah, there's a parallel to that, and actually I think there's a radio show mocking testicular cancer at some point when he's in the car as well.
That bit's fucking brilliant.
There's stuff mocking quote retards, and there's I think there's a comment about some girl gets molested, so they give her backstage passes. So it's just this cascade of really bewildering societal shit that is just piled on at the start, and as well as this guy having this constant headache. His daughter is just a brat. You know, he phones his ex-partner, his ex-wife, who's getting remarried, or she lets him know she's getting remarried to a guy called Brad. His daughter is just an absolute little shit. He goes into work, and I think he gives a book to his colleague, like the receptionist in the place. He gives her a loan of a book because it's clearly something they've been talking about, and it ends up she reports him for harassment, despite happily taking this book. In the office itself, you know, everybody's got the same jokes, everybody's watching the same rerun of their American Superstars, like X Factor clip from the night before when some boy got sort of humiliated. He fantasises about shooting his colleagues as well. He has what I would say a really good monologue, or dialogue I suppose, with his jock idiot colleague. And the speeches in this film are somewhat OTT. They're kind of clumsy. I mean, they're written in they're a lecturing sort of galloping fucking tirade, but they're very eloquent and they're not really tweaked to sound conversational.
No, it's clearly
rambling.
I think it's clearly Bobcat Goldthwait speaking to you, the audience. I think
it's like a rambling guy.
Yeah. And I think that the only thing is Joel Murray struggles to make them sound anything other than arsey. Because they're not tweaked to sound conversational.
Yep.
Because they're not adjusted. They're overly verbose, and you can hear them kind of tripping over the dialogue there. And I don't quite think they got that right. I think it would have been good to have some sort of device in the film that made those speeches more apparently
smoother.
Well, either change the dialogue to make it more conversational, or somehow use some kind of treatment of the scene to make it obvious that it's almost not really happening. You know, it's like it's like the fantasy at the beginning. It played slightly different from the rest of the film. Exactly, like it's an idealised version of what he would say, because that's exactly what it is. Like that's clearly been workshopped until it's like a perfectly watertight tirade, but that's not how we speak. And I think that's one of the points. I like it, but it trips the film up. It doesn't quite get that bit totally right. But I mean, the content of the speech is really entertaining, and I think the director obviously knows it's OTT. There's a quote in it: "American Superstars, i.e. X Factor, is the new Colosseum," talking about the decline of civilization, fall of the Roman Empire. And that's when you do, as you said, you really realise that this is Bobcat talking directly to the audience. This film is an excuse for him to fucking rant, or to maybe rant on the behalf of his wife as well, from the sounds of it. There's stuff about him then, obviously Joel Murray's character, Frank, the woman reports him for giving her the loan of the book, and for also, I think, sending her flowers when she was ill. And so the boss says, "Oh, you know, it's not me, it's the higher ups," which is a great line, because it's that pathetic, evasive, slimy bureaucracy that, you know, that's a good bit of observation. And then amidst all this, Frank goes to the doctor to try and see what's going on with his headaches, and you see him getting a cancer diagnosis. But the way he gets a cancer diagnosis, with the doctors on the phone, like, sorry, I need to take this, and it turns out that the call in the middle of this cancer diagnosis, while Frank's sitting there staring at him, just jaw-dropping, is that his card of he's been getting a valet or something like that, and it's
not the way he wanted it.
It's not the colour or something. I can't quite remember, but the whole point is at the start of this film, you're just like, everybody is a fucking piece of shit, and this guy is at his wit's end, and he's just found out he's going to die.
It's that kind of one bad day sort of thing. Sends him over the edge.
So what's he going to do now that he's found out he's going to die? And there's this moment where he flirts with killing himself, gets very close to it, and then catches, is it My Super Sweet 16?
Something like that, yeah.
Which is, you know, this absolute kind of dog shit little spoiled brat throwing a tantrum because her dad gets her the wrong car for her 16th birthday. She wants an Escalade. She wants an Escalade, she didn't want an Escalade.
I can't remember. It wasn't the car she wanted.
But
anyway.
he's about to kill himself, and he sees this on TV, and he's like, well, you know what? If I'm going to kill myself anyway, I might as well use my exit for something useful for society. There's an interesting parallel there as well, where he phones his wife, and his daughter is screaming in the background about how she wanted an iPhone, and
she got a BlackBerry.
She got a BlackBerry, yeah. And she's just a little kid at that point. I mean, it's pretty relentless in getting across his feelings towards contemporary society. Like I said, that the Charlie Sheen effect that he talks about in the interviews. Did you notice his house, by the way, is 5,773 and a half?
Yeah. Aye. So he's like insignificant. Even his house is insignificant, and his neighbour's a complete prick as well.
Intolerable neighbours.
Aye, totally. In fact, he fucks his car up. No, he steals his car.
He steals his car
for
the main
spree
rampage. Yeah. He crosses paths when he kills the brat from that show.
It's funny when he attempts to kill her. First he locks her in the car, and he's going to try and blow it up with a flaming rag in the gas tank, but then the guy blows away.
Yeah,
he's like, oh shit, because he tries to do a cool walk away.
Totally botches it. Yeah, but it ends up just shooting her in the car window.
Yeah,
which is fucking brilliant.
Witnessed by Roxy.
Instead of panicking and screaming and running off, she's just like, all right, that was awesome. And then you realise, okay, not a normal person. And then she gets involved, and the two of them, she goes to his hotel room when he's about to kill himself again, and she intervenes, and that's the only reason he doesn't die. Ends up blethering to him about, I want to do this with you, like we can actually achieve something with this. And he ends up taking it on board. Right, you'll work that bit out. I think at this point though, one thing that really occurred to me was that Roxy doesn't seem like a very real character at that point. I think it's very much a device, and it's something that Bobcat Goldthwait does a lot, where he doesn't try and put too much realism in his films. He's quite happy to do things that are very OTT if they serve his purposes.
I think he gets away with more by doing that as well. Do you know what I mean? It's the extreme stuff that happens in his films. Do you know what I mean? The cartoon violence. Do you know what I mean?
From reality.
Aye, if it was more based in the characters were more realistic, it would be harder to do those things. Do you know what I mean? Well, I'd think anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, she's fucking irritating a lot of the time. I mean, he refers to her as Goodnight Juno, and I think there's references to Juno as well. Another thing that's quite important in it is finding the balance to keep him as even though he's on a murderous rampage and he's just shot a 16-year-old girl, they're very, very careful not to let there be any sexual tension on his part. Like all of his responses to anything that Roxy says that's even vaguely suggestive are very sort of like shutting it down.
Yep, totally.
That's a weird moral trade when you think about the context of the film.
Yeah. I mean, there is one point where she's straight up asking, do you find me attractive?
I found that uncomfortable actually, but obviously it's deliberate. The way
he handles it, he's not even getting a conversation with a teenager about that, you know.
Yeah, and she also then says to him though, which is good because it's not a fourth wall break, but it's something of a fourth wall break in terms of the logic. She says, you can kill a teenager but not fuck one, which is really putting the nail on the head as regards the hypocrisy of this film, or one of the hypocrisies of this film, and showing that Bobcat Goldthwait is quite happy to engage in hypocrisies when they serve a purpose.
Yeah.
It's a kind of, it's a bad faith thing that people use against him, is to assume that he doesn't know that when they want to be critical of his films. We'll talk about a couple of the critical responses to this movie, and how I think they were sort of maybe not deliberately, misreading it, but perhaps deliberately misreading it because they just wanted to dig it. And he is quite willing to put in over-the-top characters because that's a feature, not a bug. And he is quite willing to have his own characters call out the totally inconsistent morality of his films because he just likes fucking with society in that sense. He just likes looking at the weird, uncomfortable observations. I mean, it's like Sleeping Dogs. It's like, this is just weird and uncomfortable. We've made an entire film about a really weird, uncomfortable thing. And that's, it's the same in World's Greatest Dad. It's the same in a lot of his stuff.
Yep.
He likes making us a bit...
He wants you to squirm.
Uneasy, and likes just putting in front of us our own inconsistencies, and that's what he's doing on purpose. It's not a fault. Whether you like it or not is another thing, but it's definitely not an accident. There's digs at Woody Allen in this. There's a bit of the dialogue where they get a bit wordy. I think there's a point where they scream in the word, where they squeeze in the word erudite, and it's just not the dialogue hasn't been workshopped enough.
Right.
For me, it's like...
Kind of reminds me of Kevin, you know the way Kevin Smith's dialogue can be?
I've literally got, this is Kevin Smith's Dante does that a lot in
too much. It's very, it's no natural. It doesn't come across
it's
natural.
very much the written word rather, spoken aloud rather than a conversation.
Nobody's that fucking witty or that intelligent, you know what I mean? On the spot. Do you know what I mean?
As you say, it's like a big thing in Kevin Smith, and I kind of wonder if maybe Kevin Smith and Bobcat Goldthwait, do you think they refuse to let their actors and actresses alter?
Ad-lib sort of thing?
I think Kevin Smith used to be like that. I don't think he's quite the same these days.
Yeah, but that's why his films completely fucking suck.
Yeah, but I know back in the days of when he did Clerks, like he was very much stick to the fucking script.
Because if you were reading that, I think you would be like, Kevin, I'm really struggling with this. I can't make this work.
Yeah.
And like, can we adjust it or something? Like, no, it's meant to be like that.
He's spoken about working his actors like puppets.
It's too stylised, isn't it, for me?
Yeah.
Aye.
I don't know, I kind of like that sometimes.
As long as it's not every character. Yeah. Sometimes it gets like every character with Kevin Smith.
In this film, there's a weird tone in the film where it's somewhat realistic, but also it's doing that thing as well where it's very stylised.
Aye, totally. Aye.
And I think the tone clashes a little bit,
which is
what you're mentioning, Chris, with the dialogue.
I mean, there's moments when it's in the midst of the flow of the film where it just simply doesn't work, and then there's moments where there's a kind of monologue happening, like the one at his work early on, where I think they could have treated it slightly different and made it seem almost like a kind of, I mean,
within his own head sort of thing.
Yeah, just to show it was idealised, that maybe actually when he was speaking, he wasn't speaking as eloquently as that, but that's how it was in his mind.
I get that.
The same effect. We mentioned there's a theatre shooting in it. They see this documentary called The Graves of Mile High, which, by the way, is not going to be a million miles away from the documentary I'm talking about doing with you guys. So
fucking hell, man.
And the kids in the cinema, or most of them, laugh, which leads to them getting shot. Mostly, there's one girl who they let away with.
They thank her for not speaking and not switching off her mobile phone.
Being courteous, yeah. We talked about earlier, and they talked about Juno. She's the author of Juno, Diablo Cody, is described as the only stripper with too much self-esteem by Roxy's character. I think there's a bit in it that's quite iconic where they shoot a guy for taking up 2 parking spaces, and I kind of think that's a weird inflection point in terms of your sympathy for the story, because
it's at what point do you stop killing folk? A parking space, kill them for that. The lines become blurred. Do you think they actually sat with a bit of paper before they did this film and just wrote down noisy neighbours? That's one thing you would kill somebody for, taking a parking space, and just bulletin points, and then just bolt the story around about that.
I mean, if we were being as petty as that, I don't know about you guys, I would go for folk that get their car exhausts souped up.
Yeah, racers for sure,
and people that chew loudly as well, make too much noise when doing anything, fucking in the gym, fucking eating.
I don't even understand how the car exhaust thing is fucking allowed. I mean, there's no benefit at all. Societally, it is a complete negative across the board. Terrorises fucking pets. It's deeply unpleasant. It's actually physically painful if it pops in the way by you. Like, that is absolutely, to me, the thing that, you
should be killed for.
In the context of this film, that is the one I'd be like, just fucking gunning they fuckers down. But I think the guy getting killed for the parking space, or the double parking space in this, is the point where it kind of jumps the shark in terms of being able to sympathise with their rampage. I mean, okay, he shoots a 16-year-old girl, that's fucking ridiculous.
But she's a wee cunt though.
She's also used at that point in the film to embody that sort of cultural decay. That 16-year-old girl character, she's on TV, she's creating actual societal harm in the world of this film. And so there's that kind of figurative thing going on there, and there's like a figurative thing that goes on with some of the other killings, the cinema, the cruelty of the young laughing at the My Lai massacre and things like that, or My Lai. But I think when it gets to the point where they're just killing people for parking badly, you're like, right. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think that's not deliberate. I think Bobcat Goldthwait again is now saying, right, you've enjoyed what these people are doing, and now you're actually going to have to start being a bad person for supporting what they're doing, because they've crossed the line now to just settle in petty grievances with fucking capital punishment.
They're just taking out their own kind of bloodlust, and then they're using it as an excuse just to fucking kill.
He still attempts a couple of kind of moral justifications. I mean, for example, the racist gun seller has to also be a total anti-Semite. You know, it's almost like he needs to make that character absolutely reprehensible to justify killing him, because just being a gun seller,
that's not enough.
That's not enough, despite the fact that he killed a 16-year-old girl for being a brat.
Yeah.
You know, so there are some odd inconsistencies. There's a mention of Robin Williams, by the way, he's mentioned in a news report or something. That's right.
Looks like he's wearing a gorilla suit or something like that.
TMZ finale.
Is that a reference to him being hairy?
Maybe.
And just talking about that kind of moral inconsistency and the hypocrisy and the kind of eye-rolling sort of weird place the film ends up thematically by the end, again, I think somewhat on purpose, he says to the security staff as he's shooting them on the set, we've lost our kindness.
Yeah.
And again, that's a very Bobcat Goldthwait thing, which is to do something that you're able to dismiss. Be like, what? How, we're meant to like this character? Well, are you meant to like this character by the end of the film? I don't know if you are. I don't know if you're ever really meant to like Roxy. I'm not completely sure. I think at points you're meant to, but I think, again, people are guilty of underestimating Bobcat Goldthwait, and this is one of the reasons I would go to bat for the guy, because I really like his ambiguity. I love the fact that he doesn't consider himself some like overly virtuous person. I think he just likes people being faced with their own imperfection, including himself.
Yep.
And he lets all his characters occupy these really uncomfortable spaces. They're not even anti-heroes, they're just these really messy, complicated people who at some points in the movie you like them, you know, a bit like Robin Williams, and then other points in the movie you're like, that's fucking pathetic.
That's just people in general though, isn't it?
And that's what I think is part of his genius. That's one of the reasons I've been such an advocate for him over the years in general, not just when I'm in your house.
The Police Academy, but he's brilliant in that.
I actually saw that a couple of nights ago.
So good, man.
Number 2, man.
So good,
fucking
man.
hell. Then he ends up teaming up with Sweet Pea
for the gangs. That's fucking great.
See, when you see him being interviewed, or you hear him being interviewed, right, he's quite hesitant. He does that, and you're kind of waiting for him to
I wish he would, man.
Must have been a shock to people like first speaking to him, and he didn't do that. This guy was just being a character in a film.
Such a fucking bizarre character.
That didn't hurt. So basically the theme that kind of blends this all together and brings the realisation on top of the characters, or at least on top of Frank, is that one of the things that's been consistent throughout the film is this American Superstars show where they mock this young man who has some sort of learning difficulty, and he's singing badly, and the crowd are hooting and hollering and laughing at him and mocking him, and the judges are mocking him, and the show gets replayed, and TMZ and E! Entertainment, or the equivalent in this film, are replaying it, and society, his office are all talking about it. Everybody's just ripping this young man with clearly some sort of learning difficulty, and that is just a consistent point of disgust for him throughout the whole movie. And the movie culminates in him going to the set and trying to exact revenge on the judges, trying to defend this young guy who's back on the show, and, you know, shooting the judges, like opening fire on the security staff that try and stop him and things, and being like, trying to explain to them why what they're doing is so horrendous. And the judges do sort of, there is an element of them, oh yeah, you're right, this is horrendous, but we're just sort of doing it because we get paid. But then what really flips it is that Stephen, the young man who's the subject of that, you know, they're like, you drove this boy to try and commit suicide, because that's a big part of it. It's like this boy tried to kill himself, and Frank is outraged because he thinks he's tried to kill himself because of the mockery, because of the humiliation. And actually he finds out because Stephen says to him, oh no, I did it because I thought I wasn't going to be in TV anymore. And Frank's just so taken aback by that, like, what? I thought you did it because
he's based his entire killing spree on that, basically.
And then he realises that this victim is actually as pathetic as everybody else. And again, very Bobcat Goldthwait twist in a story where even the one sympathetic character in the film, you actually pull the sympathy away from him, and just
nobody's innocent, man.
Everybody ends up a big beige mess of stuff. And so that leads to, you know, the climax, which I'm sure folk can see for themselves. But that's also going to play a part in when I go back here to look at some of the real life inspirations behind this film. But yeah, as we said, it's clearly a conduit for Bobcat Goldthwait's own frustrations. It must have been very cathartic to just go through that list of things that piss him off. And it's entertaining. He's made a comment in some interviews, you know, people were like, it's absolutely appalling that you did this. You know, you shooting young girls that in cars and all these kind of like hang-ups that you have. Like, what if we did this? You know, this is like conservatives.
Yep.
Largely, you know, conservative media who were appalled at this and knew he's obviously a kind of outspoken liberal, and they're like, well, what if we made films like this about, you know, liberal people that we don't like, virtue signalling people, and we just kill them? And Bobcat Goldthwait's response was, I would rather you made a film than actually, you know, went on shooting sprees, because that's the thing, like the conservative groups in America go on actual shooting sprees, go and shoot up actual high schools, go in these far right groups that are of these very certain specific mindsets. But even, he says, I would actually rather you made films than ran for governor. I would rather you made films than ran for office, because you inflict real world harm with your own intolerances. You pick up on your own your little fucking beefs and peccadillos, and you fucking go and build your entire political career just to try and get revenge on the people that pissed you off at an earlier time. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene and people like that, that's exactly what they did with their careers. And so he's got a point there, and he does embrace how petty his enterprise is in making this film. And he's like, yeah, I did it to feel better, and I did it so a lot of people watching this film would, because I knew they would agree with me and they would feel better. And actually it's quite cathartic, but actually they're not going out and shooting up a school.
Aye.
So I mean, that's an interesting approach. I mean, I suppose he would probably very much refute the notion that this film inspires that kind of behaviour.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Do you think as well, like just the whole, you know, the moral thing you were saying, you know, things that really, really affect, you know, piss him off? I found myself, and probably we're kind of all around about the same age. Do you think there's a drop-off point in people's age groups where they won't understand what he's trying to say? Because I completely understand where he's coming from with all the stuff he's doing. You know what I mean? Because I think we came for the time before mobile phones and, like you were saying, reality TV shows and all that type of shit. So we knew what the world was like before that. So we can almost look at that and go, right, I get where he's going with that, but I think there's like, if you showed that to somebody now in their 20s, they wouldn't get the same thing from it. I don't think, because of what I was just saying. Do you know what I mean? I don't think they have that, you know, that insight to what it was like before people were having the piss taken out of them live on television. Do you know what I mean? Because that's just became the norm now. Do you know what I mean?
There is a wee bit of that in this, I guess, when he's speaking to the jock, his jock co-worker, who's totally in on all that stuff and thinks it's hilarious, and he's. And I think at one point he just says, "Oh, you just don't get it."
Aye, there you go. Aye.
It does reflect a little bit on the generation gap.
Yeah, totally.
I think there's multiple lines that it's kind of straddling in that sense. One would be that, yeah, there is no doubt that, I mean, let's take UK culture for example, that there was a point where decorum and being a bit more reserved was more prized. And TV that you get now, what's that fucking TV show where people just, the screen comes up and you just judge men and women and their genitalia before you go on a date with them?
Yeah, the Channel 4 show.
You fucking serious? That's a show?
Yeah.
You know, seen that?
No, have a fuck.
Yeah.
Fucking
Naked Attraction.
Naked Attraction.
This is on the TV?
Yeah, it's on Channel 4.
Fuck
it's a dating show where like the screen just comes up and you just look at their junk.
Look at their bobby and decide whether or not you like that bobby.
Front and back. And you pass comment on it, and then you end up meeting them and actually going on a date with them or not.
Because that determines whether they're fucking... Aye.
What I think is interesting is when you look at that show, you do get that sort of righteous fucking indignation of like, how did we get to this fucking point?
Totally.
Because there's no denying that would not have flown in the 60s and 70s.
No chance, man.
But then again, we have to be fucking really careful here to not get into this fucking like Halcyon thinking, this Trumpist fucking like perfect era, because in the 70s you had people coming out like making fun of their Asian neighbours as the basis of a fucking TV show.
Totally.
So there are different outrages for different eras. I can understand how.
But I think to the point that Joe's making, I think, and that you as well with that show, Naked Attraction, like it's not seen as an outrage.
No,
nobody's getting outraged. You look at it as like a kind of car crash TV thing.
But we can look at it and say, "What the fuck?" But
someone younger watching it,
that's
watching it as a genuine piece of entertainment.
Exactly. Do you know what I mean?
But that's what I mean when we're straddling different lines, because some young people would be watching that going, "Well, I've grown up with that. There's nothing unusual about that."
That was the point Joe was
But then if they
earlier.
saw like a comedy that we saw maybe in the 80s,
they would be offended,
like a Carry On movie, they'd be like, "What the fuck? This is a fucking disgusting." They might get the opposite version of outrage. So there are moving parts and changes across the board, that it doesn't all just happen uniformly.
Yeah,
that
totally.
It all moves gradually to the left or to the right or forward or back.
Aye,
It's
totally.
there's a bit of a morass going on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do, you're right. There's probably certain aspects of this that won't age. I'd say there's probably certain aspects of a lot of these comedies that don't age and fall out of favour. And this is very much aimed at a certain group of people that don't get where we're at and don't get mockery TV effectively. Like he says, that American stars or American superstars is the Coliseum. That societal decay, that being an emblematic of it. I mean, it might just come around. It might be one of these things. It might also become very cult because there may be a subset of society that does continue to think like, how the fuck did we get like this? And therefore it acquires, you're right, maybe the TikTok, Instagram generation doesn't get it, but you know, maybe the fringes of it do, that just
there will be people,
do not connect to that.
There will be people definitely that will see that and go, right, that's fucked. There's got to be, but I think it's you're desensitized now. I mean, I think you were talking about kind of, 70s, 80s, 90s. The first programme I actually remember thinking, right, that's fucked and it's exploiting people was The Word. You remember The Word back in the 90s?
Yeah.
That for me was when I started to see television starting to change towards this sort of thing.
Famously having people eating shit sandwiches.
Aye.
Do you remember Eurotrash?
Yeah, that was the same. That was the same time.
The wee penguin man, like just mocking this like demented old guy that used to cut about
It was
Paris.
fucked.
And then obviously you had like the red light zone and all these kind of things happening, and you did have a lot of like really edgy TV starting to peek through, and it was controversial at the time.
Yeah, totally. The Word especially.
I think there's a couple of real life scenarios or real life inspirations perhaps for this that I wanted to draw attention to. Okay, the first one would be a guy called Charles Whitman. Now, one of the TV clips shown in the film is a documentary about Charles Whitman. He was the guy that famously shot people from the University Clock Tower in Texas.
Yeah.
And he left a note saying that he thought there was something wrong with his brain and asking for an autopsy to be performed on it after the police killed him in that incident. And, the police did kill him, and unlike Frank in this film, it was determined that he genuinely had a brain tumour, and therefore, post-mortem, he was found not responsible for his actions because this tumour was actually substantially affecting his behaviour. And that's kind of woven into this movie, so there's an interesting wee observation in that. The second one I think is the key one, and I didn't actually know about any of this, right? The Stephen Clark character in it, the one that gets mocked, well, he's actually based on two real American Idol contestants. One of them was a guy called William Hung from 2004, and that was in season 3 of American Idol, and he was seen as this really negative stereotype of Asian Americans, kind of bad karaoke singer and a total joke, but he was also seen by other people who watched the show as being refreshingly unpretentious. He was very much laughed at. The guy didn't seem to get that he was also being ridiculed, and he became quite a prominent part of that season 3 lineup, and so that was part of the inspiration for this character. The second one though, Paula Goodspeed, wasn't actually a real name. Her real name was Sandra Mae McIntyre. This is in season 5. She did kill herself after rejection from the show, and the manner of the rejection is it's heavy going. The videos of her appearance on the show are still up online. Basically, she sang Proud Mary really fucking badly, let's be honest, and the Simon Cowell in particular relentlessly mocks her. Like, she's got metal braces on her teeth, he just fucking goes after that.
He's a cunt,
it's
man.
Absolutely humiliating and awful. And I mean, like, a lot of people rip into Simon Cowell and you're like, oh, he's just one of these TV bad guys,
he's a horrible
but
cunt,
actually when you see what he did in the context of that show, it is fucking awful.
It's character assassinating people.
It's
horrible.
This woman wasn't right in the first place. Her name was Sandra Mae McIntyre. She changed it to Paula Goodspeed because she was obsessed with Paula Abdul, and she'd actually been sort of cautioned from stalking Paula Abdul, and Paula Abdul had objected to the show producers because she found out this woman was coming on the show, or her team did, and they were like, we don't really feel comfortable with her being on the show, and the producers were like, no, this will be great, bring this crackpot on the show. I'm putting words in their mouth, but bring this crackpot on the show. I
suspect it probably went something like that.
That'll be good telly. And I mean, she fucking named herself after her. Well, the thing is, when she killed herself, she fucking killed herself on Paula Abdul's front lawn.
What?
After the humiliation on this TV show.
I knew about the story. I didn't realise that's where she did it though.
Yeah, she killed herself in front of Paula Abdul's house.
It's wild.
Took a drug overdose on the front lawn.
It's fucking terrible.
And that is fucking heavy duty. And see, when you read that, like the level of disgust that wells up in you, you start to get a little bit closer to where Frank's at in this film, and
100%.
You start to get a little bit closer to what Bobcat Goldthwait and his wife are saying through this script. You know, that absolute moral outrage. I challenge you to go and watch what Simon Cowell says to that woman and watch her reaction, knowing that
she kills herself
48 hours later she was on a fucking slab.
And I bet he doesn't
give a fuck.
Yeah,
the show itself went into like serious fucking what would you call it? You know, circle the wagons, fucking like protection mode after that. But it is horrific.
It brings up that whole thing about about shows like this, kind of reality shows, having a duty of care to the people that they're putting on the show. Like there was the recent one where, who was it? Your man that was on in the mornings, Jeremy Kyle.
He's another one.
It was taken off air because
somebody killed
themselves. Because there was no duty of care to the people that they were bringing on and basically exploiting.
Oh,
and then when they're done, they're like, right, okay, off you go, that's fine. But and the head of these people, they've just been
and they've got to go back to where they come from, and they're going to get fucking ridiculed even further. Do you know what I mean? It's horrible.
Now, as I said, the critical reactions to this film were fairly mixed. The performance at the box office was poor, but then again, they had done that video on demand thing a month prior, which is like an odd move. NPR, for example, they said of it that Goldthwait is hardly the first filmmaker of his boomer generation to go after cultural decline. And they drew attention to John Waters, and they also mentioned, he did the film Serial Mom, which has a bit of that in it, and they also mentioned Falling Down by Joel Schumacher. Like Frank, Goldthwait despises not just the reductive stupidity of the lesser echelon of reality TV, but its escalating cruelty and incivility. I think Bobcat Goldthwait had defended it against the middle-aged woman who hated it, talking about that kind of Christian mom type person. And that was when he said that quote about, I'd rather you made these kind of films in response than you actually, had a gun culture and went out shooting kids. The NPR review did say there's an underlying sweetness and ethical urgency to Goldthwait's work, no matter how hairy the action gets. Frank may be a crusader for civility, but Goldthwait won't let us forget that his cleansing operation is a logical extension of precisely the brutality he seeks to avenge. And I think, they're picking up in a kind way on the fact that Bobcat Goldthwait deliberately throws his characters to the dogs, like deliberately says, well, these were sympathetic and now they're absolutely not sympathetic anymore. Make of that what you will. Other reviews weren't quite so kind. Roger Ebert, and I think Roger Ebert might actually have been the one that wrote this review, he was still alive at the time, he gave it 2 stars. And I actually don't mind this review. He doesn't like it as much as I do, clearly, but he says the first half hour or so of Bobcat Goldthwait's God Bless America promises so much more than the film is finally able to deliver. Here is a film that begins with merciless comic savagery and descends into merely merciless savagery. He also says, but whoa, what an opening. I think the film does okay, given what it's attempting to do. I think it does it quite well, actually, but I do agree that to some extent it starts with a lot more of a focused, incisive narrative and purposefully degrades these characters by, in this case he's saying it, merely merciless savagery by the end. But again, I'm saying I think that's sort of on purpose. He points out that the film doesn't name Westboro Baptist Church. Now, there's a kind of religious...
There's a group in it that are
holding the signs up.
There's a group in it, exactly.
God hates fags signs and stuff.
I think he's suggesting is that it's a wee bit of shitebaggery because it doesn't mention Westboro Baptist Church, but it does specifically name Diablo Cody. And it's like, right, well, you're either going to name people or you're not going to name people.
Go in full or don't go in at all.
Don't fucking chicken out.
Can get that.
He think Roger Ebert, or whoever was reviewing it for Roger Ebert, thinks it's all especially effective because of Joel Murray's performance. He makes Frank a decent, level-headed, respectable man and not an obvious comedy type. He's also smart and articulate. So articulate indeed that sometimes he sounds like a combination of Al Franken, Rachel Maddow, and the I'm mad as hell speech in Network. And actually, when the Network thing comparison comes up a lot, because there is a lot of that social outrage from born of slight mental illness or fragmenting mental state. And it concludes what he has created, i.e. Bobcat Goldthwait, in the name of comic social commentary, is an amoral movie about two psychopaths killing people they believe deserve to die. I see what Goldthwait is trying to do and agree with many of his complaints about our society, but finally it becomes impossible to laugh. So Ebert is one of these people that the film has teetered on the edge of acceptability in terms of that moral line that it tries to walk, and for him it's just fallen to the wrong side of it. And I get that, because people are going to have a different level, a different gauge, and for me it manages it just, and I think it manages it just because I think I have faith as a fan of the director and his other work that he knows that his characters become fairly abhorrent. But I don't know if Roger Ebert's given him that grace, and probably a couple of really bad ones. By the way, this guy Brian Eggert, he writes for Deep Focus Review, he gave it 3.5 out of 4, drew parallels with Network. This is a pretty good one actually, sorry. He brought up Bonnie and Clyde, Taxi Driver, Natural Born Killers, Jackie Brown. He is one of these people that is kind of on my side about Goldthwait's stance. On the flip of that, Spectrum Culture, and I just couldn't get my fucking head around this. First of all, their review gave it 1.75 out of 5.
What?
Which is 7 out of 20, or maybe 3.5 out of 10. Or maybe 0.875 out of 2.5.
Right.
Depending on how you want to do it. Fix your fucking rating system, guys. That is absolutely ridiculous.
Shocking.
He says, has its crooked heart in the right place. Too bad it's so inept that it can't do anything about it. It says, writer-director Bobcat Goldthwait has never been one for subtlety, but his last film, World's Greatest Dad, gave Robin Williams his best role in years. It's really difficult to care when these characters are just as obnoxious as the Bible bangers and assholes they're shooting. Well, again, I kind of think that's sort of the point.
Yeah, it's kind of, aye. Totally.
And this is one of those reviews where I'm sort of like, I don't know if it's willful or not, but they're misreading the intention of the film by the end. There is a key quote here, though. I said, so are Frank and Roxy actually any better than the people they kill? I'm not sure, and I'm not sure that Goldthwait knows that either. Well, funnily enough, I do agree with that, because I think that's what Goldthwait likes doing.
Yeah,
I think he likes
blurring the lines.
Yeah, putting in so much ambiguity that by the end of it, even he's like, are they good? I don't know. Maybe. In places. He just revels in awkward ambiguity.
Yeah.
Fucking loves that. That's his total MO. So I guess my response to that would be, I think, as I said, he fucking revels in ambiguity. In World's Greatest Dad and Sleeping Dogs, he doesn't draw absolute conclusions, and I think he demonstrates a wee bit of humility in that. I think as a filmmaker, he's not trying to tell you what's a moral absolute or what's right. Even if it's a subtle one, he's not trying to say this is right and this is wrong. He's just fucking putting mess on the table, artful mess, and being like, you work out your own morality for that. I don't fucking care.
Exactly.
Even I'm not decided.
To a point, man. I mean, the film, he's definitely pointing at the shows such as the American Idol and saying this is bad.
He's absolutely clear about that, but I think he's very unclear about whether or not he approves in any way of any of these. I mean, he almost certainly doesn't approve of any of the violent responses. But what I mean is, even as characters in a fictional world, I think he's like, is that admirable? Probably not. But I'm just going to fucking do it because it's entertaining and it raises a point. I mean, he releases a conversation into the world, not a conclusion. Would be the way I would probably put it. I think he knows that a lot of us agree with the ire that he also feels towards many of the targets, but I suspect he's conflicted about his own feelings in the matter. I just think people that have criticised it in some cases have either willfully or not missed the point of how much he's happy to watch his characters' likeability disintegrate towards the end of a film. He is just that guy, and if you aren't familiar with his work, or you're maybe just not on the same wavelength as him, I can see why you wouldn't like that. But
this is not a movie for everybody. Do you know what I mean?
You get that in World's Greatest Dad as well. Like you're on board with Robin Williams' character to start with, and then eventually by the end you're like,
and because he's pointing out that there's no absolute in anything. Do you know what I mean? Not one person's all good. We've all got good and bad in us. Do you know what I mean? It's just that line that blurs. You know what I mean?
I think it's just the thing is in the climate of filmmaking and TV, I'd imagine, and probably books as well, we're much more used to directors and writers giving us more absolutes. Telling us, well, even if it's a nuanced one, telling us, right, this was right and this was wrong, but they're still overall a good character. Even if you look at something like Game of Thrones, like a Jaime Lannister character, their cycle tended to go from pretty awful through to pretty good. It wasn't like they were pretty awful and kind of good and then became pretty good but also slightly awful. It tended to be more of an arc that you were like at any one point...
they started in one place and ended up in the opposite place to where they started.
And at any one point, you could classify what they were, whereas in this film, at any one point, it's kind of hard to classify whether they're good or
right,
or
they're right
bad.
and wrong. Yep.
So maybe just as a culture, we're more used to films drawn in simpler strokes, and that might sound daft for a film that's so fucking gaudy and puerile as this, but I think there's a lot of subtlety in the messaging and the writing in his films in general. I think people who are not a fan of them will deride me for saying that. They'll be like, it's just a fucking idiot that does mad films about people wanking dugs and fucking shooting folk in cars and like blowing up babies and stuff like that. You're like, well,
on the surface, yes.
Well, this is the thing. So his own ambiguity applies to him, because he is that. You're right.
Aye.
He absolutely is a guy that made a film about a woman giving a dog a blowy, right? But he's also a guy.
That isn't the actual story, really, of the film. Do you know what I mean?
Aye. That's just to get you in. That gets you in the door, so then he can slip his message in there.
Nothing gets me in the door like a dog getting a blowy.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
There's places in the world you pay good money for that.
I know somebody that actually wanked a dog, man. So I mean, that's fucking, and you know him as well. And I know I don't even need to tell you who it is.
I think I know.
Aye.
I just want to say to the audience, it's not me they're talking about.
No, it's no Chris, no. But I think he uses.
Maybe that's his job. Maybe he's a vet.
Dog wanker.
A breeder.
He's just a fucking horrible bastard. On a different note, I think back to the film. I think he uses really extreme visuals to kind of shock you, but it's all, he's like smashing you over the head with it to get your attention. But then there's the underlying message of the film. Do you know what I mean? And it's just whether you can, as the viewer, you're able to see that nuance in the film. Do you know what I mean? Because a lot of folk, like you're saying, are just got to go, it's a fucking mad film, guys killing babies and shit like that. But no, it's not really about that. It's like you're saying, or we've been saying, it's about the social. Society's just fucking crumbling. Do you know what I mean? And what we find entertaining now is actually just fucking base level shit. You know, like laughing at people with disabilities and exploiting people for whatever fucking reason. You know, whether it's fucking cultural or whatever.
What's kind of interesting is that laughing at people with disabilities is actually very much off the menu for this particular generation.
Aye.
It might cycle back around. It was very much on the menu for like the 1970s, for example.
Aye.
But it's completely inadmittable. You know, you can have a dating show where you look at folks' fucking arseholes, but you cannot laugh at somebody
in a wheelchair.
Yeah. So there is a kind of
shifting. Yeah. Aye. It's like it's like fashionable to be offended by this. This is the season, but it's going to be something completely different next year. Do you know what I mean? And that's can only last for so long.
I think that one thing that does occur to me, and this would be my kind of parting thought on it, right, is that regardless of where you're coming at with this film, you know that whole thing about how people are not really... You don't get people to judge a criminal if they were the person that was sinned against, right? You're relying on an objectivity and an impartial jury and all that kind of thing, right? And people watch this film and they're full of fucking... all these like very objective concerns and reservations about it, okay? But then... when you read that story, especially if you watch the video of Simon Cowell humiliating Paula Goodspeed, I challenge you to still have exactly the same feelings as you had. And see, once you see... You know, I'm not saying that you're going to suddenly be like, right, Simon Cowell deserves to be shot. I'm not saying that for a second. Your perspective, the dial will definitely shift a little in terms of how you look at what has been said in this film. And it's that thing, like, it's all very well being completely dispassionate and coming to a moral judgment and writing about it, but what I think the context of this film shows is that Goldthwait was clearly fucking disgusted by that story and fucking disgusted by the story of the Japanese boy as well that was mocked on that show. And whilst I'm not saying for a second he was at the level where he had taken a gun out and shot someone, he was fucking moved by that and had some strong things to say, even if they were sort of figurative and via the vehicle of an extremely violent film. I just, I would like folk who are going to weigh it up to watch that performance. That seems a terrible thing to say, but that was a real person.
To give context to what Goldthwait's saying in this film.
That was a real person, and that mockery, that cruelty, that fucking part of our society doesn't come at no cost. No matter how much we might want to pretend it's just a bit of fun. Why do you hate X Factor? It's just a bit of fun. Well, I'm not saying that everybody goes in X Factor is fucking killing themselves on people's front gardens.
But there's consequences.
But someone did.
Yeah.
Aye. We have fucking rewarded those people fabulously for that. And it's just fucking skin-crawlingly horrible. And so, if you are going to watch this film, I would look into that as well, to really try and appreciate the place that some of this writing is coming from, and the real sense of moral outrage that he feels. He's not just being fucking moany. He's actually deeply fucking moved by a pretty horrific thing.
Yeah. Aye, no, totally. 100%, aye.
Hey, aye, so that was the film. Shall we just go into our ratings? We have a simpler rating system, Chris, than your...
Aye, we don't have
people
any...
on the
like,
spectrum.
1.3 quarters.
1.765. Like pi out of 6.5.
I rate your film out of pi.
I've been reading about fractals recently. I could
40 decimal points.
It's in 6.5 timing.
I enjoyed the film. I didn't enjoy it as much as World's Greatest Dad.
I don't think it's as watertight as that.
Nah,
and it lacks the charisma of Robin Williams.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does, aye, totally.
The much missed Robin Williams. I felt it sagged a lot in the middle. You're saying where you could lose some time on it. There's probably around the point where they sort of get into the paedophile chat a little bit. They meet that guy in the diner.
Yeah.
And like around there, it felt that the film slowed. Not that I'd lost interest, but I wasn't as into it. I think they kind of lost where the message is a wee bit. So, around there, I'd give this film a 3 out of 5.
Nice. I'm the same as you. I enjoyed the movie, but it just didn't seem as well structured as like, you know, the World's Greatest Dad. You know what I mean? That felt, when I watched that movie at the end of it, I felt kind of fulfilled. You know what I mean? But this, it kind of felt a wee bit all over the place. It was a bit kind of scatterbrained. I think he tried to shoehorn too much stuff, like the paedophile thing. I think he was trying to cover too many bases of moral outrage. Do you know what I mean?
This is what's wrong with the world.
And I think if he'd have just stuck to the whole, you know, the disabled guy thing, do you know what I mean? And maybe whatever, but there was too much stuff about like the parking space thing and all that type of shit. Just felt like that kind of...
There was a lot of throwaway scenes in it.
I think if he'd have made like a short film, I think it would have been much more... It would have been more impactful, I think. Do you know what I mean? Because he wouldn't have had all this other shit forced into it.
Sort of Men in Black type, 82 minutes, that kind of thing.
Aye, something like that, aye. But I enjoyed it. And the opening scene, the opening scene was...
Yeah, it definitely grabbed you with that opening.
I mean, it's a bit of a fucking genius marketing move.
Totally.
Because that made a lot of lists.
Absolutely.
100%.
Into certain... I mean, it's played for laughs, obviously.
Yeah.
But to a certain person, that is an absolutely horrific thing.
That's a turn off. That's a turn off the fucking movie.
Totally.
Do you know what I mean?
It's a video nasty.
If you're a certain disposition, you're not going to be down with the rest of that film.
Isn't it amazing how that simple device of making them fantasize about that
makes it almost
passable when it's ultimately exactly the same fucking thing.
It totally is, man. Totally is. A 3's maybe too much, but 2.5 seems fucking too little.
It's very average. I think it's very average.
I would say 3. I'd say 3. It feels a wee bit bloated in places. Do you know what I mean?
With this film, I have been amazed over the years how many times I've gone back and watched it. So be curious to see if you do get that itch, because there's a lot of films like we were talking about earlier on that I've absolutely no, as much as I like them, I've no inclination to go back and watch them. I've seen this film about 6 or 7 times.
Right.
And it is a film that I would also happily put on for folk. It has a lightness about it.
Totally, aye.
As well as being very shocking. And so it fulfills a certain role. And yeah, I've gone back to it quite a number of times. So whilst I agree that it's flawed, and whilst, you know, at first blush I may have been like, 3.5, I've gone back to it a lot of times, and that's an interesting phenomenon.
No, totally. I mean, it's interesting. There's definitely enough in it that you could go back and watch it again. Do you know what I mean? It's no like, it's no completely devoid of fucking messages and shit that you can really, stuff you can take for you can, but I don't know, I probably would watch it again. Do you know what I mean?
It's definitely entertaining. It's got an entertaining value.
One thing worth noting when you're watching it as well is that Bobcat Goldthwait loves working with his friends. He says that he makes films partly as an excuse to work and hang out with his friends. For example, Joe Murray, who's been friends with for a long, long time. Yep. I think Tara was the only person that auditioned for a role, a main role in this. Everybody else was just invited because they were pals with his. And so there's a real sense of fun that goes through it.
Yeah, you get that vibe from. I mean, having only seen 2 of his films, what some of you said there, light yet shocking, and I think that lightness comes from a group of friends getting together just to make something. You know, it's in the film. No, just the actual process.
There's none of that Coppola ordeal going on here, man. These people are having a really nice time.
It's almost like a kind of like a theatre group or something like that, full of friends. Do you know what I mean? Just doing what they do for art.
Shooting babies.
Yeah, shooting babies.
Shooting babies, man. Aye, fucking right.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming.
Aye,
Chris.
cheers again, mate.
Do you
Aye.
want to punt anything? Your podcast, Unsung podcast.
Unsung podcast, yeah, unsungpod.net or whatever fucking app that you use.
Tell us about music.
Aye, we talk about a lot of different music. We've got an episode coming up on Playola, which is the fucking racket that has sprung up around pay for, listing on playlists, and how that's feeding the Swedish mafia, believe it or not.
The fucking Swedish mafia?
The Swedish mafia picked
Wow.
up on this, yeah. I mean, payola historically was a thing that the mafia picked up on, but now the Swedish mafia are in on the Spotify fake playlist game. So, those ads you get, like £15 and we'll get you fucking 10,000 listens and all that shit.
It's a load of shit.
So that's going to some pretty interesting places. And yeah, we just finished a 3-part fucking show on pulling the trigger on Nirvana. Which, I mean, as a
very
kid,
much not unsung.
yeah, very much not unsung, but that was kind of the point of the show. And we talked about incesticide and how it's this hodgepodge fucking collection of things that in a lot of ways gives a much more honest picture of the band than the things that they're better known for.
It was interesting. I did listen to the 3 episodes and it was interesting. You took a different angle to Nirvana, I think, which, and you speak about that on the podcast, how you didn't just want to retread.
I mean, the
ground.
world doesn't need another
totally
fucking here's the history of Nirvana.
No, it was good stuff, man.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So yeah, that's out every week, and there's bonus stuff, and people can go and check that out.
Cool, and come back and see us again.
Yeah, get me on for something that's not Bobcat Goldthwait.
Yeah, we'll see what comes up.
We'll get you on
the list is long,
else, man. The list is long and grim, man.
I told you I've got a pile of DVDs in my house. I have this fucking tick where I go and collect secondhand DVDs of everything that I like. So I get this fucking giant wall of them.
Send me some of the
suggestions.
I'll just send you a photo of my pile.
Aye, we'll just pick them at random.
I don't know if I want a photo of your pile, Chris.
No, that's my photo of my
That's your
piles.
piles. Finesse.
Aye, thanks for coming on. Our next film will be that one we drew last week.
Oh, Death to Smoochie.
Death to Smoochie. Yeah, so that'll
Seen
be the
that,
film we'll do
Chris?
next week.
You know what? I've not seen that.
Robin Williams is in it.
Yeah, I remember it, and it was a film that I considered watching a number of times, and I just was never ever in the zone for it.
Spoilers, man. I think you'd love it. Aye. Now we're talking about that. Very kind of similar to that kind of stuff we've been talking about there. Bobcat. I obviously not as extreme, but it's definitely got that wacky kind of vibe to it. But aye, worth a watch, man.
Cool. That's us next week then.
Nice one.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, man.